You're on. Tell me, she froze.
Looks like.
Looks like, okay.
Yeah, most of you know who Derrick Jensen is, author, environmental activist, and uh, eco-philosopher. Derrick Jensen, come on and say hello to everybody real quick.
Hey, thank you for having me on again.
Hey, you're very welcome. I'm excited to have you on. So we didn't even touch on the topics I wanted to touch on last time. So we're gonna dive deep again. So uh, first off, let's just recap what we talked about with solar and wind last time. And please explain just briefly, because we touched on those last time, what are the major problems? I'm sorry, it wasn't wind, it was solar and hydraulic power. Touch on those issues really quickly, and then the ones we have not covered yet.
Well, there's the sort of umbrella around this is that there has been a coup in environmentalism. And at one point, environmentalism was really about saving wild places and wild beings from this culture. And environmentalism has been transformed into being about ways to sustain this culture that is killing the planet. And so, for example, you can have 1 million people or 100,000 people or however many walking in the streets of Paris or DC or New York City. And if you ask them why they're marching, they would say, we're trying to save the planet. If you ask them what their demands are, they would say, we want subsidies for wind and solar. And so really, a lot of environmentalism has been turned into a lobbying arm for a sector of industrial capitalism. And so that's an incredible coup. And let's back up for a second. And one of the things I've been saying for 20, almost 25 years is that I've been asking the question, what do all the so-called solutions to global warming have in common? And what they all have in common is they take industrial capitalism as a given, and the natural world is having to conform to industrial capitalism. And that's insane in terms of being out of touch with physical reality, because the real world has to be primary, because without a real world, you don't have any social system whatsoever. So solar, hydro, all those have to be recognized for what they are, is means to power this way of life. They're not about protecting the planet at all. And so briefly, some of the problems with solar, one is that it's incredibly destructive in terms of it requires mining. It requires the spaces to be cleared for the solar. There are environmental activists around the world who are fighting installations of industrial solar because it's harming desert tortoises. They're clear cutting forests to put it in. So there's that. And again, I mean, ask yourself, does a desert tortoise benefit from a solar industrial harvesting facility? And by the way, I use harvesting. I don't use a solar generation facility, because what it's really doing is solar facilities, wind facilities, they're harvesting the energy. They're harvesting the energy from the sun. They're harvesting the energy from the wind. And that's really important, because when you think about harvesting it, that points out that it was there and it was being used by someone else. We'll get into this more later. So some of the problems with solar are they require all sorts of mining that are incredibly destructive. And then also solar harvesting generates certain, well, only AC, which can't be stored, which means that, and the same is true with wind. I mean, you can only harvest this energy when the sun is shining or when the wind's blowing. And so On the other hand, the requirements of industrial electricity are that you have a consistent supply. So what are you going to do with the ventilators at a hospital when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining? And even in Germany, where they've put in quite a bit of solar, they still, a German Institute of Physics came out and said that they've basically taken up as much of the electricity as they can because you still require that consistency, which wind and solar can't provide. And we'll talk more about, did we talk last time about the difference? They say Germany is now going to 50% solar. Did we talk about how that's really, it's like
unreal. Yeah, it's not real. So yeah, we did, but go ahead and refresh everyone's memory here.
We're going to cover other things. We'll just refer people back to the other one for now. Okay. So wind we talked about, and hydro, I can't even believe that at this late stage we actually have to talk about how destructive hydro is. Hydro kills rivers. Hydro kills the creatures who need to swim back and forth past the dam. They kill salmon who need to swim upstream. They kill Mekong giant catfish who have to swim upstream. By the way, the Mekong giant catfish is their migration is the largest animal migration on the planet. It's bigger than the Serengeti in terms of mass of animals, because these catfish are huge and they swim up to spawn. And there are dams going in all along the Mekong, and they're gonna go extinct. And dams kill the areas downstream because they deprive the area downstream of sediment. That rivers flow down, they carry nutrients, they carry sediment. The sediment's deposited along beaches. When people talk about how the beaches are eroding in California and the hillsides are falling down, it's because of dams, among other reasons. And because the beaches are being deprived of that sediment that should come down the rivers. They inundate areas, they make the water warmer. Areas that fish who require cooler water, fast-flowing rivers can no longer survive. Insects who are the base of the food chain, who live next to rivers that they're used to cyclical rising and falling of the rivers through the seasons. Instead, now the rise and fall can be much faster as water is released to serve the needs of industry. So the eggs will dry out or they will suffocate. And if you mess with the insects, you're messing with everybody. They knew that hydro was destructive. Gosh, what was it? Was it Richard the Lionhearted, I think? I think it was, passed laws saying that they couldn't build any dams across rivers that would impede salmon flow. And what's that? I don't know how many hundred years ago. People have understood this forever, but they don't care for the most part.
Right. Well, they can make money. So
they can make money, and they can power the industrial economy. And powering the industrial economy is more important to them than life on Earth. So those are the very quick solar and.
Okay, so awesome. Okay, so let's go into wind, because I know you wanted to talk more about wind power and the problems with that environmentally, as you know. Well, yeah, mostly environmentally. I mean, what's the cost of wind power?
Well, first, we have the same problems with solar that we have, that you require tremendous amounts of material, tremendous amounts of mining to build the windmills themselves, to build the systems surrounding them. They devastate the land around them. They harm birds and bats. Actually, I'm going to, instead of just throwing out some, random, oh, they hurt birds and bats, I'm going to give you some numbers on some of this stuff. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, first, take me a second to search for this. Okay, so I want to just talk about Mark Jacobson for a minute. He's one of the highest profile, quote, renewable, end quote, energy boosters. He created detailed plans that purport to show how to transition global energy usage to 100% renewable energy, renewables always in quotes, 2030. And he means energy, not just electricity, which means is including transportation, heating, and so on.
Right.
In his vision, wind power provides a full half of global industrial energy needs, far more than any other source. To make that possible, Jacobson calls for building 3.8 million 5-megawatt wind turbines by 2030. And let's look at what that would involve. And lots of environmentalists cite him as a person who is. They cite that as saying, yes, we can do this. But first, we have to talk about what wind turbines consist of. They consist of 4 parts: the tower, the blades, the bulbous bit at the top of the tower called a nacelle, and the foundation. And the largest wind turbine design is a 9-megawatt turbine, is 722 feet tall, with each blade weighs 38 tons. And let's see.
I've seen them transported before in my travels, and one blade takes up the entire bed or entire trailer of a semi-truck. Like one blade.
One blade. So let's do the math. Mark Jacobson calls for 3.8 million 5-megawatt turbines by 2030. That's 19 million megawatts total. So let's subtract the already installed capacity of about 500,000 megawatts. That means we need to build 18.5 megawatts. To build that new wind turbines would require 1.4 billion with a B tons of steel, another billion tons of steel. That's just for the towers. Another billion tons of steel and 1.9 million tons of copper for the nacelles, 130 million tons of composite fiber materials for rotor blades, and 2.6 billion tons of concrete and steel for foundations. Now,
concrete is the 4th largest pollutant in the world, like of all the pollutants, concrete, right?
Yeah. In comparison, Hoover Dam used 211,000 tons of concrete and 22,000 tons of steel. So he is proposing building the equivalent of 60,000 Hoover Dams in a period of 12 years. That's 13 Hoover Dams a day. And let's do some more math. So Mark Jacobson's plan, which is relentlessly pushed by so many environmentalists, would require 150% of the steel produced across the entire world for an entire year. And I mean, we can just go on with those numbers, but it's extraordinary to see environmentalists pushing industrial projects that would
devastate our planet.
Devastate the planet. Let's go on for a second to, okay, we're going to talk about birds and bats in a second, but before then, let's talk about for a moment, this is going to sound trivial at first, but it's actually a big deal, that when you harvest wind energy, that lowers the speed of the wind after the turbine, because you're taking energy out of the wind. And when you do this, it actually makes measurable differences in temperature and in rainfall. It changes the climate. And in fact, Mark Jacobson knows this because he has suggested putting wind turbines in the Gulf of Mexico to attempt to control hurricanes, which is just completely insane because hurricanes are incredibly necessary. I mean, if something happens in nature, we can presume that that nature has evolved with it. And hurricanes are incredibly destructive force, but they're also an incredibly constructive force because they bring tremendous amounts of nutrients up from the deep ocean, deposit them on the shore. They, let me back up and just sort of summarize that with a great quote from David Ehrenfeld, which is, nature is not only more complex than we think, it's more complex than we're capable of thinking. And so when you start messing with the power of the wind by taking the energy out of it, it's no big deal if you have one little windmill, but if you have whole banks of windmills, this actually ends up affecting the local and regional climate. And it's an extraordinary. Of course, they don't care because all they want to do is power the industrial economy. But now I want to talk about birds and bats for a second. Hold on. Okay, so wind turbines kill birds and bats, a lot of birds and bats, in two ways. The first is by direct collisions. Although it looks like the wind turbines seem to spin pretty slowly, the tips can move up to about 200 miles an hour. And birds and bats aren't used to anything moving that fast. So they're struck out of the air. They're killed instantly. They're maimed. Their beaks or wings or legs are shattered. If you ever want to cry, just look up birds, wind turbines, and you'll see videos of birds having death spasms from having been killed by wind turbines. And another way birds and bats killed is even more gruesome, because the wind turbines displace so much air as they spin that it create a pressure drop in the air right behind them, so drastic that it pulps the eardrums and the cardiovascular systems of bats passing nearby. Their eardrums and their hearts explode. And technically that's called barotrauma, but really it's called an atrocity. If you have a beating heart in your chest, you should feel that pain. So in a 2015 report, the American Bird Conservancy estimated that more than 80,000 wind turbines have been or already planned to be put up in critical habitat corridors for protected birds. And in one report, there's an estimate of 573,000 birds were killed by turbines in 2012, and projects 1.4 million bird deaths per year if the U.S. demands wind energy generation facilities produce 20% of the electricity demand. Now, if you go back to Jacobson's plan and you just do the math, I'll cut through all the math, and doing Jacobson's plan would kill 1,600 birds per hour. 1,600 birds per hour times 24 hours per day equals 38,000 per day, 267,000 per week, 14 million bird deaths per year. And the numbers could actually be much higher, because studies often underestimate the number of bird and bat kills at wind turbines, because scavengers like coyotes often carry off dead animals. And they also don't include fatalities from birds colliding with power lines and towers, which could add millions. And nor do they account for the habitat destruction caused by wind energy harvesting facilities. Like in your part of the world, they found that the sage grouse won't nest near wind harvesting facilities. So you put one of those up, you've destroyed it for sage grouse habitat.
Yeah, well, they're trying to get rid of the sage grouse anyway because it's in the way of mining here, you know.
Yeah. In fact, they're trying to get rid of the whole planet because it's in the way of mining.
Right. That's so much more important.
Another estimate of the birds who would be killed by Jacobson's plan, you do the math, it's more than 100 million birds per year. And bats, we'll look them up. Bat deaths from wind turbine in the United States were conservatively estimated at 600,000 in 2012. If you do the math, Jacobson's plan would call for about 250 million bat kills per year, 4.75 million per week, 680,000 per day, 28,000 per hour, 400 per minute, more than 7 per second every second. And in fact, a study by Bat Conservation International that looked at the hoary bat, H-O-A-R-Y, fatalities at wind energy facilities revealed the population of this bat species may plunge by 90% over the next 50 years, even if no new wind turbines are built. That study used conservative figures of bat fatalities, 128,000 hoary bat fatalities annually in the US and Canada, and assumed no new wind turbines come online. They found that with the highest possible population estimate of 10 million hoary bats, the species could still experience a 50% decline over the next 50 years. With more conservative and likely population estimates, would have a 90% decline over the next 5 decades. And one more thing I want to say about this is that anytime you bring up bird or bat kills, the so-called environmentalists who promote wind and solar always come back and say, you know, that's no, how dare you bring that up when their biggest change to their survival is climate change And in fact, fewer birds are killed than are killed by destruction of habitat generally, or by flying into skyscrapers. And this is just a standard argument used by industrialists everywhere. That it could be worse. The developer says that mall will preserve some open space, and don't worry about this industrial pesticide application, says the factory farm operator. The river gets much more pollution from other sources. If you don't let us, says the timber company, we'll subdivide for ranchettes. So everybody blames everybody else.
What do you say about the people that say more birds get killed by cats?
Well, first off, keep your cats inside. And second, the fact that
it's like an either. It's not an either or. It's right.
Imagine somebody you love is in the hospital. A doctor tells you your friend is being killed by 7 different opportunistic infections. So long as your friend's being killed anyway, we're going to infect your friend with MRSA. We see how stupid that is, right? Or somebody says to you, your child has a much greater risk of being killed in a car wreck than by a serial sex killer. So don't worry that Wesley Allen Dodd's moving in next door. And your child has a much greater risk of being killed in a car wreck than by the toxins from the factory next door. So why don't you shut up? The point is that if some creature, you personally, or some species is undergoing multiple threats, you don't go, no big deal, let's add another threat. That's crazy. What you do is remove the threats that are there. You don't add to them. It is horrific to me and unbearable that people who call themselves environmentalists play this game of saying, oh, let's go ahead and add another threat to the bats or the birds' existence because they're already under so many other threats. It's completely nonsensical to me. Well, no, it's not nonsensical. It's nonsensical if your primary loyalty is to the natural world. If your primary loyalty is to the industrial economy and to making sure that factories get more energy, then who cares about the bats anyway?
Right.
That's the thing. So many indigenous people have said to me that the first and most important thing we have to do is to decolonize our hearts and minds. And that means a whole bunch of things. But one of them it means is transferring your loyalty away from this culture, away from the economy, into the natural world. And really, my work's pretty simple. All of my work, all of my books are just, they're not cognitively challenging. It's not that I'm not smart. It's that my loyalty is to the natural world. And once you make your loyalty to the natural world, everything else falls into place. I can sum up all of my work in one little thing, which is this way of life cannot last. And when it's over, I would prefer that there is more of the world left than less. That's it. That's all of it. And
Me too.
you flip over into that understanding. Once you flip over into that understanding, everything else becomes pretty clear.
Yeah, I agree. Because you can think things through without taking capitalism, our economy, industrial civilization, all that, goes to the side, and you start looking at the effects of people on every other living thing. And it just does become really clear, but it's also very frustrating when you can't get that point across to other people, or other people just don't care, not realizing that their own survival depends on it, Well,
we've been systematically trained into valuing this culture over life on the planet. And, toward the end of our book, Bright Green Lies, we say that the book is based on a false premise. And the false premise is that if you provide people with information, they will change their minds. And the problem is that is not one of information. The problem is one of value. There's a great line by Naomi Klein in the film based on, what's the book? This Changes Everything. And toward the end of the film, she says, I've been to all these climate marches. But I have to tell you, the polar bears still don't do it for me. And ultimately, this is about us. And we mention that line several times in the book, not trying to be snarky, but because in many ways, it is the most important line in the book. Because that's the problem with this whole culture, is that salmon don't do it for us. And
Right.
sage grouse don't do it for us. And a living planet doesn't do it for us. What does it for us is
iPhones, computers,
computers.
TV shows, movies.
There was a study just recently. This is just crazy, even considering how crazy this culture is, that they asked like teenagers or early 20s people in the UK, which is more important to you, internet access or sunshine? And it was overwhelmingly the internet access is more important than sunshine.
And Ace, this morning they had that on the news about air conditioning or Wi-Fi. What would you rather have? It was Wi-Fi overwhelmingly. Not that I think air conditioning is much better, because but that's like more of a need, you know?
Yeah.
Especially in these extreme heats, but they'd rather have the Wi-Fi. Okay, I say let them boil if that it's that important to them, you know?
So ultimately, what this is about is values. And, Mark Jacobson's plan can make sense if a living planet doesn't do it for you.
Yeah, I guess it could.
It makes sense on some level, but on other levels, it doesn't make any sense at all, because it's a lot of the things he's describing are actually physically impossible. He goes for amounts of hydro in the United States, which are not physically possible because there aren't enough rivers left to be dammed. I mean, even if you didn't care about the river, even if they don't do it for you, it still would require damming to a degree that's inconceivable.
Right.
Okay, so there's short versions of solar, hydro, wind.
Let's go to nuclear.
Nuclear, we don't deal with much in the book, and nuclear, I don't.
It's probably one you didn't research as much, huh?
Well, I don't. I haven't. Okay, I went to the Colorado School of Mines, which, being somebody from the West, the Intermountain region, about the Colorado School of Mines and how conservative and energy boosting it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
It's an energy school. That's what it is, and they're. I remember seeing bumper stickers when I was at the School of Mines. Bumper stickers on cars that would say, "Environmentalists, let the bastards freeze in the dark." And so this is not an environmentally friendly school generically.
Right.
And even there, multiple professors said that when you take into account the energy costs of mining, and when you take into account the financial costs of mining, and also decommissioning, that nuclear, the best thing you can do from an energy return on energy investment perspective, as soon as you finish building a nuclear power plant, is to decommission it. It's just, those are people at the School of Mines. I mean, this is conservative, hardcore conservative, like let's drill baby drill sort of people. They were dismissing it out of hand because it just doesn't really make any sense. And it was pretty much presumed that the nuclear power industry was a claim to virtue for the mining for the nuclear weapon industry. And I don't know if that's true, but that was a common presumption when I was there at the School of Mines a long time ago. And
do you think they could be dismissing it too because they want to push more of the fossil?
You froze up, so I couldn't hear the question. Well, until you come back, I will just talk about random things then. Nope, you're not back yet.
This stupid internet.
Wait, oh, there you are. So what was your question?
Okay, so do you think that their take on the nuclear was more because they wanted to push fossil fuels?
No, I don't think so. And I don't know. But here's another part of this, is that one of the things that nuclear does, perhaps even more so than any other form of industrial energy, is it locks us into the system. And I've heard a lot of people say to me, we can't bring down civilization because of all the nuclear power reactors that they will all.
I heard that too, yes.
And I find that argument kind of absurd for a couple reasons. The primary reason is that we aren't actually cleaning up nuclear messes, but making more of them. So every day this culture continues, it's actually worse. And unless you think this culture can last forever, then obviously you don't want to continue making it worse every single day. And the world would have been better off if this culture would have stopped doing this 1 year ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. And the other thing is that, and I know people are going to talk about genetic damage, and that's true, but the truth is that Chernobyl is doing better than it was when it was agricultural. I mean, the wildlife,
yeah,
and they may have genetic damage, but
no people.
So the point is that the worst nuclear accident, with the possible exception of Fukushima, the worst land nuclear accident in the history of the planet is, or in the history of Western civilization, is far less harmful than the everyday actions of industrial agriculture. And,
right.
But the other thing I want to get back to is that by building more nuclear power plants, you are condemning the planet, committing the planet, condemning is better, to more of a future of this, because how are you going to deal with them in the future? What are you going to do? You're simply creating more waste for the planet to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making the planet weaker every day that you do that. And another thing that's really important with all of these is, what is the energy being used for?
To increase energy use. Every new bit of energy they create, whether it be wind, solar, whatever, nuclear, they just start using more, correct?
Yes. Did we talk about Jevons Paradox last time?
I think briefly, but it bears repeating.
Yeah, I think this bears repeating by everybody every day. We should all make little altars to Jevons. And
Absolutely, yes.
So that was a joke for you literal-minded people. Jevons was an economist who studied coal use in the 19th century. And what he discovered was that when you increased efficiency of coal use, it didn't decrease the amount of coal that was actually used. It increased the amount of coal that was used because it's cheaper, so you find more uses for it. And so this is called Jevons Paradox, and it's true everywhere. And just one way to think about it is, so I live in Northern California. Northern California is known for redwoods and for marijuana.
Oh, and, yeah. That was obvious.
So it's known very much for marijuana. It should really be known for salmon, but it's known for marijuana. And lots of people I know living here, like one major town south of me, 1 out of every 5 houses was a grow house back before it was legalized. And so I know a lot of people who have grown. And one of their primary costs is energy. Now, say you're just growing for yourself and you're selling some, you're making a living, and your primary expense is electricity, and suddenly you find a way to cut your electricity bill in half. Well, if you're just an individual, it's like, great, I'll cut the electricity bill in half and I can use the extra money to protect land. But if you're a capitalist, what you're going to do, if you can drop your energy use in half, what you're going to do is you're going to double the size of your grow.
Right.
You can grow twice as much. Your profits are way higher. And this is what we see. This is Jevons Paradox. Or another way to think about this is, we think about another thing that's always pushed by a lot of these environmentalists is efficiency. We need to make everything more efficient. And I didn't come up with this. My friend Max came up with this. It's brilliant, I think, that He says, okay, to think about efficiency, let's just ask, would it be better for the world to have cars that got 100 miles per gallon or cars that got 1 mile per gallon? And at the top of your head, you think, well, it'd be better if they're 100 miles per gallon, wouldn't it? Because then they're going to use less gas. But he points out that if cars only got 1 mile per gallon, nobody would drive anywhere because it's too expensive. And so there wouldn't be any need for car culture. It wouldn't make any sense to have these motorized wheelbarrows. And
Right.
When Max told me that day, I had driven 5 miles up to this really great taqueria. And at 40 miles per gallon, 5 miles is what, 1/8 of a gallon? So that's $1. No, I'm saying it's $1. It's 50 cents, 40 cents, 20 cents, whatever. God, I'm a physicist and I can't even do the simple math. Anyway,
I can't either. So.
on the other hand, if it's $1 a gallon and I'm driving 5 miles each way, that's going to be 10 miles. I'm not going to pay $10 extra. No, Jesus, that gas is $3 a gallon. I'm not going to pay $30 for 10 gallons of extra gas. So I wouldn't have driven that far. So lowering the prices actually, or increasing the efficiency, increases use. And this is true for every form of energy that's out there, has just added on to the other one. So this is the thing that puts the lie to all of this solar, wind, all of this crap, is that if you look at a graph of, is there an easy way for me to share a screen with you?
No, there isn't.
Okay,
really?
no, it's fine. Well, then I'll just use my fingers. It's like,
Okay.
of energy usage from 1770 up to the present. And you'll see, first there's wood, and then there's coal and hydro. Hydro gets added about 1900. Coal, oil, hydro. Everyone simply adds on. And in fact, even just wood use right now, wood use for energy is greater today than it was in 1770. So oil has not replaced wood, it added on to wood. Coal has not replaced wood, it's added on to wood. Hydro has not replaced coal, oil, wood, it's added on to them. Same with solar and the others, they just add on.
Right, exactly. We have not reduced our fossil fuel usage since they've added all the solar anywhere. Like
No.
There's nowhere they've actually reduced fossil fuels because they've added solar, wind, or what have you.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes, completely agree. And here's the thing, and I want to be clear, I'm not a big conspiracy theory fan. So this is not some cabal of 4 people, just going, how can we make this happen? Instead, this is how capitalism works. It's like my friend George says, you don't have to have a conspiracy when everybody thinks the same. And I think that this whole renewable energy, so-called renewable energy movement, is more a response to peak oil than it is global warming. Because when I was in school of mines, I took quite a bit of mineral economics. And mineral economics is like regular economics, except with non-renewable resources. So the one big rule of non-renewable resources is you get the easy ones first.
Right.
So if you're going to get oil, the first thing you do is you go where you can just scoop it up. And then after that, you go where you have to drill it. And then after that, you go where you have to drill it in the water. And then after that, you go for shale. You get the easy ones, move to harder. With me so far?
Yes. No, I understand the peak oil, and that's a very good point because they're worried about running out of easy oil supply. So they want to move to another energy source to continue what we have going on. Exactly.
The problem is that the research involved in this is incredibly expensive. And corporations can't pay for it. How can they get subsidies?
Yes, subsidies. Yes.
Get subsidies. Oh. And also, it's incredibly destructive. God, I know. We're saving the planet. That's how we can get subsidies. We'll save the planet by getting lots of subsidies for the same companies that drill for oil are now doing wind and solar. And again, this is not some conspiracy. This is just how capitalism works.
Right.
See? Okay, and a way to think about this is that, different sectors of the capitalist economy will have conflicts. but they all agree on one thing, which is they need more.
The bear's behind you again. Just saying.
Yeah.
Hi, bear. Okay, sorry. The bear. Gotta say hi to the bear. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you, but there's a bear behind you. Oh, damn. I'm sorry. I said bear.
No. It was because he pounded on the window.
Okay. Okay, good.
He's a yearling. He's not around so much.
So cute.
When he is, he's kind of insistent, so I might have to go in the other room so he doesn't annoy us.
Do you feed him?
Anyway, so what are we talking about? Oh, so what they need is more. They need more of everything. And a great example would be how they will be in conflict and they're fighting for subsidies. So, for example, you get the water usage of the Colorado River has been, the Colorado River, more than 100% of it is allocated to be taken out. And they're building more pipelines all the time. And so the different farmers want the water, computer manufacturers want the water, municipalities want the water, golf courses want the water, and they will fight among each other to see who gets the water, but they're all in agreement that there needs to be more water taken out. And it's the same with energy. So you can have the fossil fuel companies fighting the solar companies for who gets the subsidies, but they're all in agreement that there needs to be more and more energy. And so when you get this is the big fight between the Republicans and Democrats. Is not really a fight over saving the planet or not saving the planet at all in terms of energy. It's a fight between those who want to support the fossil fuel industry and those who want to support the solar industry. And it's just sectors of industrial capitalism. It has nothing to do with saving the planet. And in fact, one of the primary pushers of the Green New Deal, they asked him, so is this about saving the planet? It's like, no, this is about revamping the economy.
Yeah, I heard that. Where was that? I heard that really recently. That was insane. No, this is not about the economy. It's or saving the environment. It's about the economy. I think that showed up on Fox News because they wanted to point out the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, but really, it's the same. They're two sides of the same coin. They just are.
Well, they both care more about the economy than the planet.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I'm one of those that cares way more for the planet. Humans are a plague. We have not done anything to help the environment. The environment would be better off without us. The environment will live on without us. However, with us, we'll kill it. So we're just small. We're little. We're minute when it comes to the planet. And it's not very popular opinion, but
I'm sure it's a fairly popular opinion among bears and
yes.
and grasshoppers and spotted owls and Pacific lampreys and porcupines and everybody. And it's also a popular opinion among. So here's the thing: a few years ago, I asked several years ago now, I asked Anuradha Mittal, former co-director of Food First, if the people of India would be better off if the global economy disappeared tomorrow. And she laughed and said, yes, of course. Said that there are former granaries of India that now export dog food and tulips to Europe. There are people who have been subsistence farming in India for thousands of years. And the global economy hasn't helped them. In fact, it's harmed them because Coca-Cola has taken their land. And, my mom, many years ago, loved to travel. And one of the places she went was Africa. And she said that there were lima bean farms, industrial farms taking over great swaths of Africa, forcing people off their land, and that those people would be better off without the global economy, so they can export lima beans to Europe. And likewise, then later, maybe 5 years ago, I asked Vandana Shiva, okay, that's fine about the people of India being better off if the global economy disappeared tomorrow, but what about the people of Mumbai? What about the people in the slums of Mumbai? Would they be better off? And she, again, laughed and said, yes, they'd be better off. Why do you think they're in the slums? They're in the slums because They've been forced off their land by Coca-Cola, by the transnational corporations. And if you want instant land reform, destroy those corporations. You know, we always hear about how the world needs to have more electricity. The world doesn't need more electricity. And in fact, humans have survived very well without industrial electricity.
Yeah. Yeah. The lower level, those economies that aren't based on huge amounts of industrialism and capitalism, those are the people that are going to do the best when all this falls down.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, you know, every cell in my body wants for us to have a voluntary transformation to a sustainable way of living.
Me too.
And every cell in my body wants for us to have a sort of gradual descent where we use what fossil fuels are left very carefully to dismantle dams, to, you know, you don't get rid of it all right away, but instead, you know, throttle down. That would be really nice, but it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. No.
I've made this joke before that if I were in charge of the economy, the first thing I would do is outlaw retractable stadium roofs. I know they're trivial, but it's like, that's someday, 100 years from now, people are going to look back, presuming there's any people still left. And first off, they're going to say, what the hell was wrong with you that you didn't fight like hell when the world was going down? And second, they're going to say, wait, you use this energy to make retractable stadium roofs
right?
to make it so people could fly around the world at whim?
So what is the answer? I mean, we've been through this before. I mean, nature is primary, absolutely. And you have to make it primary. But the problem is, for one, there's too many people to get there, but we could make some efforts if we could convince people that this is an actual issue.
Did we talk about this last time?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I can't help but touch on that topic. So it's
Did we talk about the fact that it could be solved really easily without draconian measures?
Yeah, absolutely.
Reproductive freedom?
Yes. And yeah, I definitely talked about that because I was one of those women who didn't have reproductive freedom. I was denied that. So yeah. So absolutely, there's that. But I think it should go even a step further myself at this point because of how desperate a situation we're in. They should have it all free. Like, you should be able to be fixed, and men should be able to get fixed for free. Just reduce the population as fast as possible. But there is the problem if only the elite are the ones that have babies and the other people don't. So there's that discussion that just opens up a whole entire other can of worms, which we probably don't have time to go into. And I do want to get to some questions from the people watching.
Okay.
So let's go there. Let me make I can't make it any bigger. Can I? Let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay, cool. So guys, with your questions, Mr. Red says nature is precious and must be treated respectfully. And I agree. And I think that's one of the few things we can do in these times is do what we can to respect nature as much as possible instead of adding to the destruction. What do you think, Derrick?
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do is to protect every wild place and wild being and protect every wild community. It's like an environmentalist friend of mine says that as things become increasingly chaotic, he wants to make sure that some doors remain open. And what he means by that is if bull trout are still around in 50 years, they may still be around forever, but if they're gone in 50 years, they're gone. So it's even more important to make sure that sage grouse continue and to make sure that, you know, when people ask me what to do, I always say the same thing. I don't know if I said this last time, which is find what you love and then defend your beloved, because whatever it is under assault. And if you love sage grouse, then fight for sage grouse. And if you love, like I know somebody who loves prairie dogs and she fights for them. And it's
Deanna Meyer. Yes.
Deanna Meyer.
I haven't interviewed two of your people. I'm working on a third. So yeah.
Yeah. So whatever you love, whether it's a place, whether it's a species, it's under assault. Or it can also be, if you love discourse, discourse is under assault. You know, you doing this and having these interviews, both discourse is under assault and long form discourse is under assault. And we need to have not just a soundbite culture where you can talk to somebody for 5 seconds, but instead a culture where you're actually being able to develop ideas for an hour, or in a book. That's under assault too.
Absolutely.
Assault in terms of, you know, there used to be independent bookstores everywhere. And first they were destroyed by Barnes and Noble, and then Barnes and Noble was destroyed by Amazon. And
that was sad. I used to love going to bookstores.
Yeah. And so that's under assault. So there was a guy here in town. He ran a bookstore for maybe 15 years ago to 5 years ago. And because I believe in independent bookstores, I made the commitment that I was going to buy one book a month from him. And I did. And that's just a small thing that one can do. And he did a bigger thing by trying to run a bookstore. So no matter what you love, it's under assault. So, and did I tell you the story about buying gas and how that got me started in activism?
Yes, you did, but say it again.
Okay, so very quickly, I wasn't doing anything. I was just in my 20s. I was like, everything's messed up. I can't fix anything. And then I realized I wasn't paying enough for gas. At the time, gas was about $1 a gallon, and I would spend about $10 a week on gas. I realized that wasn't covering the economic and social costs. So I decided for every dollar I spent on gas, I would give $1 to a local environmental organization. But I didn't have any money, so I could also pay myself $5 an hour to do activism. And so if I spent $10 on gas, that means I have to do 2 hours worth of activism that week. And I started out by writing letters to the editor, and then I started doing, you know, anti-fur demos, anti-circus demos, anti-military demos. And then I went from there to filing timber sale appeals. And so the point is, the big distinction is not between those who believe we need to bring it all down and those who don't. The big distinction is between those who do something and those who do nothing. So no matter how busy you are, I don't care how busy you are, you can find 1 hour a week to do something. And that's a start. So that's that. What's the next question?
Let's see. I was hoping someone would let Oz know. Oz, is there any questions you think? I thought he was paying attention. It's hard for me to go through all these. Let's see. Val nailed it. Thank you. Okay, Trisha says thank you for the interview with journalist Christopher Ketchum. Amazing guy. That was a good interview.
Well, thank you, and I'll pass it on next time I talk to him. Yeah, he was great.
A friend of mine was involved in the fight to save the wild horses in Nevada. It was a losing battle against big oil and gas and big animal agriculture. Yes, I am so aware of that, Trisha. Nevada is horrible against the horses there. I've heard of those battles, and they'll do anything not to take care of the horses, to get rid of them. Okay, Gazar, one of my favorite people. What about sea level rise, flooding, nuke plants on the coast? Yeah, that and the warming of the oceans, not being able to cool the reactors anymore. What do you think about that, Derrick?
Well, I think that if they put me in charge of the economy, I would make it one of my top priorities to start dismantling and moving all of that stuff to safer places. So yeah, that's. I mean, I love sports and I like watching baseball. I love watching sports, but I think it horrifies me that you can have 40,000 people tonight are going to go to I don't know, who's playing today. The Dodgers are playing the Marlins. I know that, unless the game's over. And you can have 20,000 people at that game. It would be nice if that same attention was paid to trying to figure out what to do about nuclear power plants on the coast. Wouldn't that be nice if you had 20,000 people going out and spending 3 hours?
You can't get anyone paying attention that long on something like this, except for, the small group we have here does.
This killed me. So California passed Prop 215 that was in 1997, I believe, that made it so you could grow marijuana for personal medicinal use.
Mm-hmm.
And it was up to the county how many plants you could have. And this county right here, at one point, said you can have 99 plants personally, and then they were going to reduce it to like 3 plants personally. And I went to the Board of Supervisors meeting. That's in California, it's Board of Supervisors as opposed to county commissioners. So the commissioners meeting, I went to the supervisors meeting, and the place was packed. And people were so mad. You know, if they would have actually reduced it from 99 to 3 or 6 or whatever they were going to reduce it to, they would have been chased down the street with pitchforks. And it was a great example of how direct democracy works. That it's like, no, you will not do this. And it broke my heart because all these people were out there willing to fight for marijuana. But if you were to have the same thing about salmon, there would be the same 4 people show up who always show up, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's just really sad. I mean, not that I totally believe medical marijuana is a thing to fight the big pharmaceutical companies. We need that. Absolutely. But yeah, the fact that
people care about marijuana more than they care about salmon.
Exactly. Okay.
More care about baseball than care about whether the nukes are going to flood.
Right.
Just frankly terrifying.
Right. I think most of the people here have their priorities a little more straight, but humanity, who should I vote for, or nobody at all? I guess you're getting asked political questions. It's election season, like it never stops.
You know, I honestly don't know on the big scale. I don't. Okay, here's my political evolution through voting. 1980, and don't kill me for this because he didn't win by 1 vote. I was young and stupid and voted for Ronald Reagan because I had heard that he was going to balance the budget, and they said that was good. And then he didn't balance the budget, so it was a big lesson for me because I learned that politicians lie. Okay, I'm late to that party, but I eventually
got it.
84. I was driving around. I wasn't able to vote. I was physically. I couldn't do it because I was driving around, whatever. And don't give me any shit about absentee ballots. Fine, whatever. 88, I voted Democrat. And then 92, Clinton kind of cured me of that because I remember I was so pissed at George Bush because he said he was going to destroy he wanted to weaken the Endangered Species Act. And that's terrible. So I actually went to the Democratic caucus and like, yay, we're going to push hard for somebody who's good. And then Clinton came in and he was an environmental disaster. You know, he pushed NAFTA. He weakened the Endangered Species Act, not by weakening it, but instead by defunding agencies or lowering funding of agencies and
taking away of power and all that. Yeah.
In the agencies to make them less nature centered. And so he was more sneaky. And since then, I've really realized that the only argument that the Democrats have had, see, I was different than my mom and I'm not saying there was a golden age of Democrats, but there was a time when the Democratic Party was a bit more interested in working class people. You know, she was around. You know, Lyndon Johnson had his problems. He was pretty awful in some ways, but he pushed some civil rights stuff pretty hard. And he also pushed the war on poverty pretty hard. He also pushed the war on Vietnam pretty hard, but let's leave that aside. Anyway, the point is that through my adult lifetime, the only argument that the Democrats have had is at least we're not Republicans. And that argument has gotten old. I wish that the Democrats would actually stand for one thing, they're certainly not standing for women. They're not standing for the environment. That said, I want to be really clear that I do actually believe in voting on a local scale. I think that
that's definitely going to matter more.
Yeah, in a town as small as I live, in a town as small as this, it can make a difference. And also, the supervisors here, I mean, since this is such a small town, I can actually go in and talk to them. And, it's not my people talking to their people. It's not lobbying. It's just, hey, Dave, how you doing? That's a former supervisor I know. And
That's the way it's here too. I can go talk to my mayor. I have my mayor's cell phone number in my phone.
exactly. So on a local
Nice.
scale, I think it's incredibly important. And on a larger scale, who was this? Okay, there's a great line. I don't remember exactly what they said, but basically, I got to find this real quick. I love this. I don't even know how to find it. I know.
Okay, while you're looking for it, who is your favorite author? Kent Deal would like to know.
Okay, I found it, so I'm going to read this, and then I'll come up with a favorite author.
Okay, got it.
As corporate anthropologist Jane Ann Morris writes, corporate persons have constitutional rights to due process and equal protection that human persons, affected citizens, don't have. For non-corporate human citizens, there's a democracy theme park where we can pull levers on voting machines and talk into microphones at hearings. But don't worry, they're not connected to anything, and nobody's listening except for us. What regulatory law regulates is citizen input, not corporate behavior. So I love that about a democracy theme park where we can pull levers.
Right.
Who's my favorite author? Okay, True Confessions time. What I read mainly these days is crap. So I really like the Jack Reacher series of thrillers.
Oh, so you're like getting out of this reality.
Well, part of the problem, honestly, is that most environmental books make me want to throw them across the room because they're not biocentric and ecocentric.
Right. And your endings. Oh, I just watched your ending. The endings are terrible. Whatever video that was. You know what I'm talking about. The one you just put out. All endings are terrible or something.
But the endings always stink in environmental things because they were like Food Inc., which is a great example. They were great at laying out the problems with industrial agriculture, and then they come to solutions, and they always stop. And the solutions in Food Inc., one of them was buying organic yogurt at Walmart. Are you kidding? That's a solution to industrial agriculture? So favorite authors. If we step away from thrillers, etc. Favorite authors. Neil Evernett's The Natural Alien is fantastic. One of the most important books I ever read. I love Lewis Mumford, especially his 2-volume set, Myth of the Machine. Fabulous books. I love R.D. Laing's The Politics of Experience, except that R.D. Laing himself was an abusive batterer, horrible human being, but the book is good. Susan Griffin's Woman in Nature, fantastic. Another favorite author, let's see. Eric Fromm's The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness was incredibly important to me. Those are some off the top of my head, but some of the most important books I've ever read. Neil Evernett's book was the first one that really introduced me, the first one that didn't take the sort of human-centered perspective. I was in the Spokane Public Library when I was 26 or 27, and it jumped off the shelf at me. And it had this thing on the back cover about how, what do you do if you just made this impassioned defense of some creature and continue to exist in some creature, and then somebody says to you, well, what good is it? And they said, what you see here is a collision of worldviews. That does the animal get to exist for itself, or what good is it to me? And the only response you can really give to that is, well, what good are you? Right.
What good are you? But most of those creatures really do have a purpose, whether humans are smart enough to figure out what that is or not. Look at the groundhogs that Deanna Meyer, or prairie dogs that Deanna Meyer protects. They're really important to aerating the soil and to bring down groundwater and all that. They're so important, way more than just a little creature that eats and provides food for other prey animals. It's part of the web, right?
Absolutely. So that was a really important book. Should I go to the next question on the?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Do you want me to read it? You want to read it?
I can read it. Wouldn't you support the idea that only a progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders might be the only chance of taking on the climate challenges? Honestly, I don't think anyone who supports industrialism can take on climate challenges. I think the question to ask is, if salmon could take on human manifestation, what would they do? If blue whales could take on human manifestation, what would they do? Here's a question. If humans who are alive 150 years from now could jump back in time and they could do things now to make life better for them in the future, how long do you think oil refineries would last? A day?
They'd be done.
How long do you think, again, if Delta Smelt could take on human manifestation, how long would the pumps on the Sacramento River last? It wouldn't last overnight. So one of my CDs was called Now This War Has Two Sides. And that title was about recognizing that the dominant culture has been waging war on the natural world for the last several thousand years. And this is a war that cannot be won and will by definition be lost in its waging. And I think that if aliens came down from outer space and they were doing to the planet what industrial civilization and industrial capitalism are doing to the planet, I think we would know what to do. And I think we would do it. And I think they would sing songs and tell stories about our resistance. But because it's the culture into which we have been inculcated, we settle for things that aren't really solutions. And having said this, I want to be explicit and say, yes, I think that Donald Trump is worse than a Democrat. I'm not saying there is no difference. I'm saying that
there's not much of a difference.
I'm saying that both of them will kill the planet. Mm-hmm. One will kill it a bit faster.
Right. Well, I don't know. I'm worried about the Green New Deal killing it faster. Because
if it leads to more mining, I mean, that's really the measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more destruction of the planet, more deforestation, more killing of the oceans. Like it would be devastating. What we need to do is reduce our energy as much as possible, reduce our population. But that's not going to happen. So I get a little depressed when I think that people aren't listening to the real possible solutions and looking at the problems with what are being proposed that makes you just feel good for supporting.
Well, what you can do is what you're doing. I mean, this needs to be said. Remember, Neil Everden's book saved my life and saved my sanity by jumping off the shelf at me at the Spokane Public Library. And I could not have written the things I've written without his analysis helping me along. And the truth is that we are all holding hands through time. And, you know, I'm holding Neil Everden's hand, and then some people have come along and taken my analysis further. And, you know, I'm holding their hand too. And we're holding hands here too. And we're all
pushing up ideas. Like my normal co-host on my Monday show, his name's Val, Val Hay 56. Anyway, we like to think about it as trickling ideas up, like trying to get ideas out and up. So
Absolutely. And to switch metaphors yet again, it's like making a stew. You know, we're all throwing in our contribution, and then we have to hope how it tastes good.
Right.
So, and also remember, there's this great line, I don't know if I said this last time, about how it takes 10 years to change your mind. That this guy was very strongly anti-choice, and then 10 years later, with no discernible transition, he found himself very strongly pro-choice. And that's how change happens in the real world. It's not that you and I do an interview and then somebody in the audience goes, oh my God, now I'm changing. Instead, they're going to fight us. They're going to disagree. Well, I can't speak for them, but I know for myself that, okay, a great example of this is when John Livingston introduced me to the idea that evolution is based mainly on cooperation, not competition. And when I first read that, it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And then within a couple of years, I found myself no longer able to conceptualize. It made no sense that evolution would be based primarily on competition. Yeah, there's some competition, but it's mainly cooperation and how you fit in with everybody else. And that's how change happens. At least for me, again, somebody says something to me, it's like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. That's completely wrong. And then 2 years later, I go to the same person. I say, hey, I had this great idea. And then I mirror back the idea they told me 2 years ago.
See, same here. I was fighting for the Green New Deal 6 months ago, like fighting tooth and nail, like we need to have this. This is the way to go 6 months ago. And it was just, one little piece of information at a time and putting it all together. And at first I fought anyone who would say anything negative about it. I fought like hell. It's like, we need this. And then I realized this is going to grow the economy. It's going to destroy nature faster. You can't base any kind of environmentalism on growth, period.
Do you know what has actually reduced emissions worldwide?
What's that? I'd love to know.
Recession.
Yes.
2008, 2009, carbon emissions went down. That's the solution. When the economy needs to degrow. And did I tell you the story about my mom cleaning my room?
Yes, I love that story, though. No, I don't know if you told me specifically or on my channel, but I've heard it.
Real fast, because this has to do with this whole thing, too, which is when I was a kid, I was messy, as I still am, and my mom said, you clean your room, and I didn't. She said, clean your room, and I said, I didn't. And then she said, clean your room, and if you don't, I'm going to come in and clean it, and you're not going to like it because I'm going to throw everything away. And so we have a choice. We can either intentionally and with kindness degrow the economy by starting with retractable stadium roofs is first day. Second day is golf. Third day is
lawns, all lawns.
What? What'd you say?
All lawns, like
yeah. Day 3 is lawns. We can scale back.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we don't do it, nature's going to do it, and we're not going to like it because it's going to throw out everything.
Mm-hmm. And we won't have.
So
food.
that's the thing. It just makes me so upset that people will sometimes call me an extremist or call me crazy.
Alarmist? Did they call you alarmist? I get called that.
Alarmist, I get some. I get crazy more often. Mm-hmm. And it's simply that I'm actually pretty conservative, and I just think it's a really bad idea to kill runs of salmon that have been here for basically since the last ice age. I think it's just a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea.
Them dying in I think it was Montana, or was it Alaska, where the water temperature is too high for them to survive?
Oh, the water temperatures are often too high. That happened in the Klamath a few years ago. That wasn't really global warming, probably added to it. But the real problem with that is that there are a bunch of dams that make reservoirs and the water heats in them.
Because they're just sitting there, they're not moving.
The water, the reservoirs need to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so any other questions, or are we done, or what's now?
Let's see. Let's see if there's any more questions. Last chance, people. Let's see. Looks like they're just talking among themselves. So I will let you go because we're already quite a bit over an hour. So I hate keeping you that long, but damn, it's hard letting you go once I have you here. Because so much more we could talk about. But
we got through wind, solar, nuclear.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about more agricultural, industrial agriculture, but maybe next time.
So we still have biomass.
Yeah.
And which harvests a lot more energy than wind and solar put together. When people talk about renewables, mainly they're talking about biomass, which means either growing crops industrially or cutting down forests.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
am too.
Okay, so that will be our topics next time.
Okay.
We'll hold on to those for our next conversation. And hopefully we get everybody psyched to buy your book next year, which will go in way greater detail. So thank you so much, Derrick. If you want to, I don't know, I just like to say goodbye after we end the show. So hang on for 1 second and we're going to play the bye. Bye, you guys. I love you all. I'm sorry if I didn't get to any of your comments. It's kind of hard to focus on my guest and the comments at the same time. But thank you all for being here. And we will talk to you maybe later tonight for Women's Wednesday. So have a good night, guys.